Hello, I'm here with Kim O'Neill, and she's going to tell us about her books, plural. So, Kim, tell us.
Yes, so thank you for having me, Jennifer. So currently on the third co-authored book, and here's where it's interesting because it was about 4 years ago I set the intention that I would love to be a published author. And I didn't know how that was going to come about, but I just started being open to opportunities, and opportunities started showing up. So all three books that I've done so far are co-authored books. Two of them are anthologies. One is a unique book in its own right. And I'll just kind of share with you each of them. The first two kind of have a connection point. The third one does not. So the first one is called Positive Minded People, and it's an anthology book inspiring stories of overcoming adversity for living a more positive life. And this is one that the first time I learned that the phrase of birthing a book has real, legit meaning. Um, and I think that process can be a little different for everyone, but this was my first birthing a book experience, and it was quite intense. It was emotional. There were parts of me I had to resolve and heal, because when you start to realize, oh my goodness, I'm going to share some of these deep, dark times in my life publicly, there's all these things that start to show up for you, right? That you got to figure out, well, how do I feel about this? And what do I think about that? And, well, I want to share this, but, ooh, what if this, all these things. So that was a huge birthing process that I went through for that one. And I'm grateful that I did, because come to find out, like it's been able to help some people be able to move through their own challenging times. So I'm very grateful for that. The second one, it was in 2019. And again, I was still open to, publishing more books, but I wasn't focused on that necessarily. And someone else connected with me and said, hey, would you like to co-author a book? And we bounced a few different ideas off of each other, and we were getting excited, but nothing really stuck just yet. We were just kind of in that open space of, we want to do something, we're not sure yet. And one day, all of a sudden, I received an email from we knew that we were going to do everything on our own. We were going to do things kind of non-traditionally. And so we were just kind of open to, like, what does that look like? And so one day I received an email from a site that actually allows you to create your own books, not a traditional book publishing site. I'm talking about a site that lets you, add photos and do things like that. And I received an email with a coupon from them, and all of a sudden the inspiration hit for a different kind of book. And so the second book I'll show you it's a hardcover book. It's called You Are Loved, an inspired meditative journey, an inspired meditative visual journey. And what this book is it's a combination of stunning photos from my co-author. She lived in Key West, Florida, and just continually taking gorgeous photos of that space. And I liked to write. I'm a fan of meditation. And so what we did is we combined our two arts together, and her photos combined with a guided meditation that I wrote specifically for this. Flow was a big, big deal for me. So when we put this together, it's like, what are the, first photos, and what are the photos after that? And what are the words that fit here? So it was really a very deep process of, again, going within and saying, what is the message that wants to be shared here? And this also had very much a growth and birthing process all in its own, very unexpected, and yet incredibly powerful. So to me, writing a book is not just for, putting some of your words and your messages out there in the world. There's a whole inner journey that takes place for the author before anybody else even hears about the book. So that definitely happened with that one too. And then the third one that at the time of our interview today hasn't been published yet. It's going to be in just about a month here, is also another anthology book, and it's about inspirational stories. The book is called Navigating the Clickety Clack: How to Live a Peace-Filled Life in a Seemingly Toxic World. I apologize. I'm trying to memorize the entire title. So, and that one also had its own little birthing process, because other new things showed up for me as that opportunity came around. But I would say the theme with all of these books is really for me, it's important to provide inspiration and hope and support for people in moving forward in their life. And so both stories shared in the anthologies are about that. And the connection point between these first two books, Positive Minded People and You Are Loved, is that the story I share in this first book really goes back to a time in my life when I was going through a very painful breakup, and I was not already in the habit of meditating and doing certain self-care and, using spiritual tools and things like that I use today. I wasn't used to back then. And so this was really the telling of how I started getting into that. And so one of the things that helped me when I was going through the challenging time I share in this story was getting into a habit of meditating. So this, to me, is a beautiful then secondary step, because to me, this is a book, I tend to call it, some people laugh, but I tend to call it meditation done differently, because when you think of meditation, there's so many different ways to do it, but a lot of people think of it as something you close your eyes, you go inward, and okay. But to me, meditation can be anything. So you can literally open a book, keep your eyes open, look at the photos, take in the messages, and that can also be a meditative, very calming, peaceful experience. And so I just simply share that because to me, it was nice to be able to have something that takes my readers on a journey from understanding, you may be going through one thing at one point in your life, and then you get to the next phase and things start to open up and can be more peaceful and different. So anyway, so that's some of the background of these books. And it's been interesting.
I love how you were talking about the birthing process and how that has to happen before most people know about the book. You do learn an awful lot about yourself when you're writing a book, because you're going to spend a lot of time in your head and paying attention to your thoughts in a way that you usually don't.
Yeah, definitely. Would you like me to say a little bit more about the first book and how? Oh yeah. So when I realized I was about to write my first, published anything, I did go ahead and say, okay, Kim, you know what to do. You're supposed to, go inward and let's get clear. What is the story you want to share? And so I did some of that, and I was probably a few pages into one story when I was hitting that wall.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, something's stuck here. What is this about? So I sat with it some more, did some more journaling, did some more meditating, and it dawned on me, oh, I'm supposed to share this other story that I don't want to share. That was a very painful time in my life. I was just so grateful to have been so healed and moved beyond it. And my intuition was really saying, Kim, this is the story you're supposed to share. And so that for me was a big part of that birthing process, of really getting to the space where I could feel okay with sharing this and knowing that it's okay. I know there's a quote out there, something about that one thing you don't want to share or say is the one thing you're supposed to share and say, because there's a person out there who needs to hear it. And that's from, the experience I had when writing that first one, for sure.
And when you were resisting it, experiencing that as a writing block, I'm in the process of developing a course on writer's block, and I want to move people who take that past the idea that all writer's blocks must just be plowed through. Some of them are there because they're telling you something, and you have to learn how to tell the difference between I'm not getting the writing done because I'd rather be watching Netflix today, and I'm not getting the writing done because I need to be talking about this other thing that I don't want to touch. For the story that you didn't want to touch, that you ended up having to, how did you, my clients often worry, I need to write about this thing that happened, with my mom or my partner or whatever, and I'm afraid it's going to hurt them or it's going to embarrass me that it's out there. How did you navigate anything like that?
Well, so yes, for the story, for that story, there was one person in particular that was very much a catalyst for the pain and heartache that I was going through. And I'm no longer in contact with that person. So to me, it was very important to make sure I'm not identifying who that person is. Mm-hmm. So that one was somewhat easy. I used a different name. you know, and that was that simple. As for me and my stuff, I mean, it was all that getting clear and going, okay, you know, why is this so hard for me? And what must I move through to get to this place where I can be okay with it? Because first off, all of us, I mean, there aren't really any news stories that any of us could tell. So me sharing my own stuff in here, I mean, there are probably a million other people who have similar experiences and stories, right? It's just different names, different places. It's the same thing. So for me to have such an emotional charge and an attachment to, you know, just what you said, what are people going to think about me? All the, you know, or yeah, what are my family and friends going to think? Is this going to make me look bad somehow? I had to get clear on how, you know, no, it doesn't. How does it help me? How does it help others? How does it help my bigger purpose and my bigger mission? And to be able to see that thread and connect all of those dots and detach. I had to detach, you know, that's part of, to me, the birthing and healing process is when the more you can detach and be free of things, then they can't impact you as much. And that to me is where the true healing comes in. So here I was at the start of going, okay, I'm going to write this chapter thinking I'm already beyond this and I'm already healed. And yet in the process of writing it, I learned, oh, I must not be entirely because I'm hesitating in sharing it. So so that's also what I mean by, you know, it's for me just as much as anybody else who might benefit from even reading it.
And that's also one of the ways you get to know yourself in the process, because you find out what's not healed. Because if it is healed, you can find a way to talk about it that you're comfortable with sharing.
Yep.
And yeah, our brains are very good at telling us that. We just don't always like how they decide to share the message. I just want to write this thing.
Yeah.
In your writing process, you know, just the more day-to-day sit down and write kinds of things, how did you approach that?
Yeah, that's another great question. Well, I will say for me, it might be a little different for some other people who are writing a full-on book. Again, each of my projects have been co-authored, so my contribution was shorter than a full book. But I would say, you know, definitely there was some procrastination, especially as I was in the resistance phase. And definitely there were times where it's like, no, Kim, stop, sit down and do this. And deadlines are really good for helping out with that. And I mean, that's pretty much the extent of it is what I would say. Is I would say, you know I'm working with a deadline. Yes, I've had some resistance. And Kim, this is your work to do right now. So just kind of, you know, being mindful, present with myself and doing the work. And to me, you know, aligning my energy and meditating, honing in with what is the message that wants to be shared is a part of that. Once I finally am there to do it, it's like, okay, what's the message? I don't want to just write for writing's sake. I don't want to write stuff and have it be fluff or have it be something that doesn't actually get my point across in a clear way. So that's very important to me. And I want to make sure that the energy that I'm sending to the reader is the one that is the energy I want to be sending out. So the more clear and aligned I am, then that's, you know, what the reader can receive.
Yeah, it's always, I've loved this whole interviewing process, finding out how different people work, because some people who I knew before, and I knew that this was how they approached it. They just, right, I'm going to write at 8:30 every morning. And, you know, she was at her typewriter or keyboard, 8:30 every morning. If I had told my brain that's what we were going to do, it would have said, nope, we're going to do anything else, but we're not doing that. And you do have to learn what writing looks like for you, because if you try to adopt somebody else's strategy, it's not going to happen.
I completely agree. I'm very much an in the flow person. And so I love that. And yet, if you're not feeling the flow, that can be a problem, because then what's getting done? So learning how to navigate that within myself has been a challenge. And the more structure that I can infuse into my daily schedule and, you know, setting intentions, okay, or goals, you know, this week, this is my goal to get this done, then it opens up space for flow to show up as well. So I've had to learn that aspect of it and know, okay, it's not just we're going to wait until the moment hits. Like, let's set up some parameters so that I can click into that space and get the work done. That has helped me.
And having the, knowing that, meditation is going to help you get into alignment so that you can write, and knowing those things about yourself is so important. I know that if it's just not happening for me, if I switch to crayons and then lined paper, all of a sudden my internal editor gets out of the way and the words come out. Nice. But I need to move to something that's less formal than the Word document on my computer, because that looks too much like work.
Yep.
And yeah, the parameters thing is very important. I always encourage my clients to check in with their project every day and to commit to spending 10 minutes with it a day. If 10 minutes turn into 2 hours, great. If 10 minutes is all you can do, you kept the commitment. And that is so important on the building, because if you say you're going to write and then you don't, then it's so much easier to not write the next day.
Yeah, that's great.
And then if you really can't write, then you write about why you can't write. Have you ever tried that?
I haven't. Well, what comes up for me when you say that is when I often tell people, hey, journal. And they're like, well, I don't know how to journal. How do I do it? And they kind of just write these like very strict sentences. I say kind of what you just said, write whatever's in your mind. So if that's literally, I don't know how to journal. Why is Kim telling me to do this? You know what I mean? Okay, this is really annoying. Oh, but look, wow, I just wrote 4 lines. I do encourage, just some free form writing to get into that flow. So I agree. Yes, I've done that before.
Your brain will only tolerate the I don't want to journal written so many times before it gets bored and comes up with something else. Your books are fairly different from each other, but how do they work in or with your business?
Yeah. So the aspect that my books really connect to and speak to is definitely my coaching. So I'm a transformational confidence coach and interview coach that goes deep with people and helps them to get to that space within them where they can own who they are and be more courageously confident. So a lot of times what that brings up is something from their past that maybe they haven't healed from, they haven't worked through. And the stories that I share help speak to those deeper aspects of life. But in addition to my coaching, the books also speak to my podcast, which is called Every Day is a New Day. And that's inspiring stories about moving forward, choosing to have a positive outlook, choosing to be more of who you authentically are. And these books are also inspirational and about being in that moving forward, learning from the life that you've been living and, your experiences and all of that, so that you can move forward more freely and less tied to the past. So that's how.
And I think especially the first one with the coaching, they can see in your first book how you were going through that. So they can see that you've been where they were. I think a lot of what we do is we write the book we wish we'd had. If I'd had my book when I was writing my PhD thesis, it would have taken 2 or 3 years off the process. But I wasn't ready to listen to my own advice then. And that's that you have to be ready to hear it.
Yeah. Well, and it takes time. These are things like you can't necessarily rush, but it's interesting how when you have something like, okay, now I'm going to write a book, how all of a sudden some of these processes can get sped up a little bit. Yeah.
And you have to sort of look at a process that had been fairly nebulous and think about how it actually works, because you're going to have to explain it to somebody else who's not in your head.
Yep.
You've talked about, overcoming resistance to not wanting to write about something, and about dealing with writer's block and coming up with your own process. Did you have any other writing problems, like imposter syndrome or the other usuals?
Imposter syndrome definitely came through the first one. That was just like filled with everything. So definitely that first one. I would say also, as someone who's experienced the co-author experience, each one of my books, the process has been a little different. I've learned something new about myself and about the process, different in each time. And I will say, for me, so I am someone who does like to write. I say that because I've found not every author actually likes to write, but I I do like to write, and I am a fan of words and grammar and flow within what I write, and so that's always very, very important to me. And so in that, some of my perfectionistic tendencies tend to come out. I refer to myself for the most part these days as a recovered perfectionist, and I've had to learn in a co-authored book process that you have to detach from that even more. So, depending on what the publisher or editors and their role and how that goes, you may have to detach even more. And so that to me has been a little bit of a challenge, but another good opportunity to learn how to detach. How I may write something and I would love for it to sound a certain way that I hear it in my head, and even though it's on paper, someone else can read it and still get the story. It's just going to be, I don't think I'm making any sense right now. My point is that what ends up getting published may not be exactly the way I would want it to be. And yet the point is still going to come across to the reader. And so learning how to be okay with that, it's been a good thing. It's been a good thing for me to learn how to be okay with that. That's something that's been a challenge.
Yeah, and working with co-authors, you find out new things about those relationships. Did you have previous relationships with your co-authors? Had you worked with them before?
Not necessarily. Relationships form and develop in the process. I'm just kind of going through everyone right now. Yeah, not really. No. So they were all pretty new when the book, each book, began. So
yeah, all of my co-author experience was when I was an academic. Okay. So I got to let my perfectionist tendencies have full reign because academic writing is very different and very structured and stiff.
Right.
But the trying to get a sort of unified idea of what this thing that we're all creating is going to look like, I think is the same no matter what genre you're writing in, because you've got all of these people and they all think that their idea makes perfect sense, and you've all got to somehow get one idea, and that's going to be a challenge, however many you are or whatever you're working on.
I agree. I mean, it definitely requires you to have that, that team mentality and know that, okay, this isn't just about one individual, it's about the collective group. And so, I think I love that you brought that up, because being able to tap into that has also helped me in ways throughout my book processes as well. Going, that's right. We have a collective front that we are presenting here to the world. And I want that to occur. So if that means that, what I've written shows up a little differently than how I imagined it, that can be okay. I get it. The books have a life of their own is what I've learned. And so interesting.
That was one of the hardest things for my literature students to accept, that there's not a true answer for what the book is about, because the book is going to be slightly different to everybody who reads it. And I understood that intellectually. And then whenever I started publishing, I was like, but I know what I meant. That's not what you're saying.
I know.
You have to let go of that because the book means that to them. So there's a lot of learning involved in publishing. What advice do you have for first-time authors?
I say do it. I would say don't, as much as possible, rip the Band-Aid off. If you have an opportunity in front of you to finally become published, it's something that you want to do, and you're just like, maybe you're the one person holding yourself back, getting in your own way, rip that Band-Aid off, because it is a fantastic personal growth experience. Might be a little painful, might be a little uncomfortable, and yet it makes you even stronger. It makes you even more powerful in whatever it is you do in the world and in sharing your messages And I am a firm believer that that message you want to share, or maybe too afraid to share, someone else absolutely is going to benefit from it. So when you can get to that space where you can feel comfortable and confident with it, you're going to be a fantastic leader and a pillar of strength for the person who's not there yet. So it's kind of like different phases of our experiences, right? We go through the pain and heartache, we go through some healing, and then, oh, now it's time to share it because you are up leveling. You're upgrading your experience into something more so that the next person can benefit from it. And so if you can get to that space and allow that to sort of inspire or motivate you, I say do it. It's worth it. And it's never as bad as you think it is. It's all really inside our heads. So the more we can kind of work through some of that, then we get to serve others in a better way.
Love it. Does come down to just get out of your own way and do it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing with us. Make sure you look up the information I put above this video so you can keep in touch with Kim and look out for her
Thank you, Jennifer.
book.